Commander Sarah Chun pressed her face against the reinforced viewport of the research vessel Meridian, watching as another volley of plasma fire streaked past the hull. The ship's emergency lights bathed everything in an ominous red glow, and the constant vibration from the engines told her that Chief Engineer Martinez was pushing their drives far beyond recommended limits. "Status report," she called out over the chaos of the bridge. Lieutenant Torres looked up from his tactical display, sweat beading on his forehead. 17 hostile contacts maintaining pursuit formation. They're matching our speed, but not try to close distance. It's like they're hurting us. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the mission's xenobiologist, gripped the back of Torres's chair as another impact sent tremors through the deck plating. This doesn't make sense. The Kethvar were peaceful when we made first contact. Their entire culture is built around harmony and balance. Sarah nodded grimly. She remembered the initial contact protocols from 6 months ago. The Kethvar delegation had seemed genuinely interested in establishing trade relations with humanity. Their crystalline ships were beautiful, almost organic in design, and their representatives spoke in melodic tones about mutual prosperity and understanding. "Incoming transmission," Communications Officer Park announced. "It's on the same frequency the Kethvar used for diplomatic channels." "Put it through," Sarah ordered. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a Kethvar commander whose usually shimmering blue skin now pulsed with aggressive crimson patterns. The creature's 4 arms gestured in what Sarah had learned was their equivalent of extreme agitation. "Human vessel, you will submit to boarding inspection. Your species has violated the sacred compact by allying with the Devourers." Sarah stepped forward, keeping her voice level despite the accusation. "Commander Zethiron, there must be some mistake. Humanity has no knowledge of these Devourers you speak of. We seek only peaceful exploration and scientific advancement." The alien's response came as a harsh harmonic that made several bridge officers wince. "Your ignorance is not absolution, human. The Sphere of 9 Worlds has evidence that your species provides technology to the Devourers in exchange for coordinates of vulnerable worlds. You will be brought to justice." The transmission cut abruptly, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. The Sphere of 9 Worlds was the local galactic government, a coalition of species that had achieved interstellar travel millions of years before humanity took its first steps out of Earth's solar system. "Ma'am," Torres spoke up hesitantly, "our defensive systems are holding, but barely. Whatever these Devourers are supposed to be, the entire sphere seems to believe we're in league with them." Dr. Vasquez moved to her research terminal, fingers flying across holographic displays. "I'm pulling up everything we have on galactic civilizations in this sector. If there really is something called the Devourers, there might be references in the cultural databases we've been collecting." The ship lurched suddenly, as a near miss sent debris spattering against the hull. Sarah grabbed a support rail, her knuckles white with tension. The Meridian was a research vessel designed for deep space exploration and scientific study, not combat. Their defensive screens and point defense systems were meant to handle micrometeorites and cosmic radiation, not a concentrated attack by 17 advanced alien warships. "Found something," Dr. Vasquez announced, her voice tight with concern. "According to Kethvar historical records, the Devourers are a nomadic species that appeared in this galaxy roughly 50,000 years ago. They're described as consumptive. They strip mine entire star systems, harvest all biological matter, and then move on. Why would anyone think we're working with them?" Sarah demanded. "Because," Dr. Vasquez continued, her face pale as she read further, "the last recorded Devourer attack was in a system that had recently been surveyed by a human exploration vessel. The Perseverance, Captain Martinez commanding." Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. The Perseverance had been her previous command, before she'd been assigned to the Meridian. That can't be a coincidence. Another impact rocked the ship, and this time the lights flickered ominously. Chief Martinez's voice crackled over the intercom. "Bridge, I'm reading cascade failures in the port shield grid. We can't take much more of this." Torres looked up from his display, face grim. Ma'am, they're tightening the formation. I think they're preparing for a boarding action. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, weighing their options. They were 3 days out from the nearest human outpost, completely surrounded by hostile forces that outgunned them by orders of magnitude. The Meridian carried a crew of 43, including some of humanity's brightest scientific minds. She couldn't let them fall into alien hands, based on what was clearly a misunderstanding. Can we break through their line? She asked Torres. He shook his head. Not without taking catastrophic damage. Their ships are faster and more maneuverable than anything in our fleet. Dr. Vasquez suddenly straightened at her station. Wait, there's something else in these records. The Devourers, they communicate using quantum entanglement transmissions. Instantaneous communication across any distance. So that means they could coordinate attacks across multiple star systems simultaneously. But more importantly, it means their technology might leave quantum signatures that could be detected and tracked. Sarah began to understand. You think someone is framing humanity by mimicking Devourer communication protocols? It's possible. If someone wanted to turn the sphere against us, making it look like we were allied with their greatest enemy would be an effective strategy. The ship shuddered again, and this time the sound of twisting metal echoed through the corridors. Emergency klaxons began wailing as atmosphere started venting from somewhere in the lower decks. Hull breach on Deck 7, K. Martinez's voice. Sealing emergency bulkheads now. Sarah made her decision. Torres, begin broadcasting a wide-spectrum distress signal. Include everything we know about this situation and our coordinates. If someone is setting humanity up, our government needs to know about it. Ma'am, that signal will take months to reach the nearest human fleet, Torres pointed out. Then, we better hope we can stay alive that long. Sarah turned to Dr. Vasquez. Elena, I need you to compile everything we can about these Devourers. If we're going to be captured, I want to be able to prove our innocence. The xenobiologist nodded and dove back into her research with renewed urgency. Around the bridge, the crew worked with the focused efficiency of professionals who knew their lives depended on their performance. The pursuing Kethvar ships began broadcasting what sounded like surrender demands in multiple galactic languages. Sarah recognized snippets of Altarian and vegan trade pidgin mixed with the harmonic tones of Kethvar formal speech. They're offering us one final chance to surrender peacefully, part translated. After that, they'll use what they call forceful compliance measures. Sarah looked around her bridge one more time. These people had signed up for exploration and discovery, not a desperate fight for survival against impossible odds. But they were here now, and they deserved better than to be branded as criminals by alien powers who refuse to listen to reason. Signal our response, she told Park. Tell them that humanity does not negotiate with kidnappers, and we will prove our innocence through proper legal channels. The communications officer's hands hesitated over his controls. Ma'am, that's essentially a declaration that we won't surrender. That's exactly what it is. Park nodded and transmitted the message. The response came almost immediately in the form of concentrated weapons fire. The Kethvar ships dropped their pretense of restraint and opened up with everything they had. The Meridian S shields collapsed under the onslaught, and the ship's hull began taking direct hits. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits as the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. In the distance, Sarah could see sleek boarding pods launching from the enemy vessels. Mom! Torres shouted over the din. I'm reading massive energy signatures approaching from the edge of the system. Multiple contacts moving at incredible speed. Sarah felt a flicker of hope. Human ships. Torres studied his readings, frowning. I don't think so. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases. Whatever's coming, it's big, and it's moving faster than anything we've ever seen. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her terminal, her face a mixture of excitement and terror. According to the historical records, there is one species in this galaxy that both the sphere and the Devourers fear. Who? Sarah demanded. They're called the Death Speakers in most translations, a nomadic warrior culture that appears when genocidal threats emerge. The records say they've been dormant for over 10,000 years. The main screen suddenly filled with an image that made everyone on the bridge freeze in shock. Emerging from the quantum foam at the system's edge were ships unlike anything humanity had ever imagined. They were massive, their hulls seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it, and they moved with a predatory grace that spoke of technologies far beyond current galactic understanding. As the mysterious vessels approached, the Kethvar ships began to scatter, their formation breaking apart in obvious panic. But the newcomers were faster, surrounding the entire engagement zone in a matter of minutes. Then, the communication channels erupted with a sound that sent chills down every spine on the bridge. It was a voice speaking in perfect, unaccented Terran Standard English. "Attention, human vessel. This is Admiral Marcus Webb of the Terran Federation Deep Strike Fleet. We received your distress signal and are moving to assist. Maintain current position and prepare to be escorted to safety." Sarah stared at the screen in bewilderment. The ship configurations were completely unknown. The technology seemed impossibly advanced, and yet the voice was unmistakably human. But how could human ships have reached them so quickly? And where had they acquired such devastating-looking vessels? "Torres," she said slowly, "run a full sensor sweep on those ships. I want to know everything about them." As the tactical officer complied, Sarah realized that their rescue might be even more mysterious than their original predicament. The distress signal had only been broadcasting for minutes, yet somehow an entire human fleet had appeared with technology that seemed centuries ahead of anything in current service. The Kethvar ships that had been so confidently pursuing them were now fleeing at maximum speed, apparently terrified of these new arrivals. Whatever answers awaited them aboard those mysterious vessels, Sarah was certain that humanity's place in the galaxy was about to change forever. The boarding pods that had been closing on the meridian suddenly reversed course, racing back to their motherships as the Kethvar fleet prepared for emergency jump to hyperspace. But the mysterious human vessels moved to intercept, their weapons systems powering up with energy readings that dwarfed anything Sarah had ever seen. "Ma'am," Torres whispered, his voice filled with awe, "those ships, they're not just advanced. They're using technologies that shouldn't be possible according to our understanding of physics." As the first of the dark vessels moved alongside the meridian, Sarah realized that whatever had just arrived to rescue them was going to reshape everything humanity thought it knew about its place among the stars. The docking bay of the vessel that identified itself as TFS Retribution was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen aboard a human ship. The walls seemed to be composed of some kind of adaptive metal that shifted and flowed as her shuttle approached, creating a perfect seal around their craft. The atmosphere was breathable, but there was an undertone of ozone and something else she couldn't identify. As Sarah and her senior staff disembarked, they were met by a reception committee that looked human, but moved with an unsettling precision. The leader, a tall man with silver-streaked hair and eyes that seemed to hold depths of knowledge no human should possess, stepped forward. "Commander Chun," he said in that same perfect English they'd heard over the communications, "I am Admiral Webb. Welcome aboard the Retribution." Sarah studied the man carefully. His uniform was definitely human in design, bearing insignia she recognized from Earth's military traditions, but the materials seemed to shimmer with an inner light. "Admiral, I have to ask the obvious question. How did you receive our distress signal so quickly? We only began broadcasting minutes ago." Webb's expression remained neutral, but Sarah caught a flicker of something in his eyes. "Time is relative, Commander, especially when you're dealing with quantum communication networks and fold space technology." Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic protocol. "Admiral, the energy signatures we detected from your fleet suggest technology that's far beyond anything in current human databases. Where did these ships come from?" "That's a long story, Doctor," Webb replied, gesturing for them to follow him through corridors that seemed to extend much further than the ship's external dimensions should have allowed. One that begins with humanity's first real encounter with the galactic community about 80 years ago. Sarah exchanged glances with her team. 80 years ago, Admiral, humanity only made first contact with alien species 7 years ago. Webb stopped walking and turned to face them, his expression grave. Commander, what you experienced was humanity's second contact with galactic civilization. The first happened in 2045 when a human deep space probe encountered a Devourer's scouting force in the Alpha Centauri system. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. That's impossible. There are no records of any such contact. There are no public records, Webb corrected. The encounter was classified at the highest levels. The probe's crew of 12 managed to escape, but not before learning that Earth was already marked as a target for Devourer harvesting. They resumed walking, and Sarah noticed that the ship's crew moved with the same unsettling precision as their escorts. Everyone they passed looked human, but there was something in their bearing that spoke of experiences no Earthborn human should have had. The Devourers operate on a timescale that makes human civilization look like a brief flicker, Webb continued as they entered what appeared to be a briefing room. They had been observing humanity for decades, waiting for us to develop spaceflight so they could use our expansion patterns to identify and target other developing civilizations. Dr. Vasquez sank into one of the offered chairs, her face pale. You're talking about a conspiracy spanning nearly a century. Not a conspiracy, Doctor. A survival protocol. Webb activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy from a perspective Sarah had never seen before. Entire sectors were marked in red, indicating systems that had been completely stripped of all matter. When the probe returned to Earth with evidence of the Devourer threat, world governments had to make a choice. They could reveal the truth and watch civilization tear itself apart in panic, or they could prepare in secret. Lieutenant Torres leaned forward, studying the star map. This suggests that the Devourers have consumed hundreds of star systems. Why hasn't the galactic community been able to stop them? Because the galactic community doesn't fight wars the way humans do, Webb replied, his tone carrying a note of pride that made Sarah uncomfortable. Species like the Kethvar, the Altarians, even the Vegan Trade Confederation, they've spent millions of years evolving beyond physical conflict. They negotiate, they compromise, they seek diplomatic solutions. And humans? Sarah asked, though she was beginning to suspect she already knew the answer. Humans are Deathworlders, Commander. We evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill us, so we learned to kill back. More importantly, we learned to kill efficiently, ruthlessly, and with complete dedication to the survival of our species. The holographic display shifted, showing ship designs that Sarah recognized as human in origin, but which had been modified beyond anything she'd ever seen. The vessels were sleek, predatory things that seemed designed for one purpose: warfare. For 80 years, humanity's best and brightest have been working on this problem, Webb continued. We've developed technologies that the peaceful species of the galaxy consider unthinkable. Weapons that can crack planets, ships that can travel through folded space, artificial intelligences designed specifically for tactical combat analysis. Chief Martinez, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Admiral, if Earth has been preparing for this war for decades, why were we never told? My entire family serves in the fleet. Webb's expression softened slightly. Because, Chief, the public face of humanity needed to remain innocent. When we finally made contact with the galactic community, they had to see us as potential allies, not as the weapon we were designed to become. The peaceful exploration vessels, the scientific missions, the cultural exchange programs, all of that was real, and all of it was necessary. Sarah was beginning to understand the scope of what Webb was describing. You're telling us that every human in public space service has been unknowingly serving as cover for a secret military buildup. Not unknowingly, Commander. Unknowing, yes, but not unwillingly. Every human who ventures into space, makes a choice to risk their life for the advancement of our species. The only difference is that some of us were told about the specific nature of that risk. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her notes, her expression troubled. Admiral, if humanity has been preparing for war with the Devourers, why are we being accused of allying with them? Webb's jaw tightened. Because someone has been very clever about framing us. Over the past 2 years, every system hit by Devourer raids has had prior human contact. Someone with access to our navigation databases and communication protocols has been feeding information to the enemy. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Sarah realized that her crew's current predicament was just one small part of a much larger conflict that had been building for decades. The question, Webb continued, is whether the spy is human or whether someone else has gained access to our classified systems. Torres pulled up his own tactical display. Admiral, the Kethvar ships that were pursuing us, they scattered the moment your fleet appeared. That suggests they know about your capabilities. The Sphere of Nine Worlds has encountered our deep strike forces before, Webb acknowledged. 3 months ago, when a Devourer fleet attempted to harvest the Altarian colonies, we intervened. The operation was successful, but it revealed our existence to the galactic community. Sarah stood up, pacing to the viewport that looked out onto space. She could see other ships of the mysterious fleet, their dark hulls seeming to absorb starlight. Admiral, what exactly are you asking of my crew? I'm asking you to help us prove humanity's innocence while we prepare for the real war, Webb replied. The Devourers are moving faster than our projections indicated. Intelligence suggests they're massing for a major offensive that will target multiple systems simultaneously. Including Earth? Dr. Vasquez asked quietly. Including Earth. The weight of that statement settled over the room like a blanket. Sarah realized that everything she thought she knew about humanity's place in the galaxy had been carefully constructed fiction. The reality was that her species had been preparing for a war of survival against an enemy that had already consumed hundreds of civilizations. There's something else, Webb said, activating another section of the holographic display. Our intelligence networks have identified the source of the security breach. The spy isn't human. The display showed a creature that looked like a cross between an insect and a machine. Its body was segmented and metallic, with multiple limbs that ended in sophisticated manipulation devices. Most disturbing were its eyes, multifaceted and gleaming with an intelligence that seemed both ancient and utterly alien. Meet the Architect, Webb said, a species that serves the Devourers by infiltrating and subverting other civilizations from within. They're shapeshifters, capable of perfectly mimicking any biological form they've studied. Torres studied the image with professional interest. How long have they been impersonating humans? We're not sure. The first confirmed sighting was 18 months ago, but they could have been active much longer. What we do know is that they have access to classified information that should be impossible for them to obtain. Sarah turned back to the group. How do we identify them? That's where your crew comes in, Commander. Dr. Vasquez's expertise in xenobiology, combined with your experience in deep space operations, makes your team uniquely qualified to help us track down the infiltrators. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her notes. Admiral, I'll need access to detailed biological scans of everyone who has had access to the compromised information. If these architects are as sophisticated as you suggest, detecting them will require analysis at the cellular level. Agreed. But first, we need to deal with the immediate situation. The Kethvar fleet that was pursuing you has undoubtedly reported your location to the Sphere of Nine Worlds. They'll be sending a larger force to investigate. As if summoned by his words, an alarm began sounding throughout the ship. The holographic display shifted to show a tactical overview of the star system, with new contacts appearing at the edge of sensor range. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace, announced a voice over the ship's communications system. Configuration matches Sphere of Nine Worlds battle fleet. Estimated time to weapons range, 37 minutes. Webb smiled, and for the first time, Sarah saw something in his expression that reminded her that humans were, as he had said, Deathworlders. Well, Commander, it looks like you're about to get a demonstration of what humanity has become while you've been away from home. As the crew of the Meridian prepared for their first glimpse of humanity's secret war, Sarah realized that the peaceful exploration mission she had signed up for had just become something much more dangerous and much more important for the survival of their species. The tactical display in the Retribution S Command Center showed the approaching Sphere fleet in stark detail. 47 vessels of various classes, their formations precise and coordinated in the way that spoke of millions of years of military tradition. Sarah had seen similar formations during humanity's diplomatic exchanges with the galactic community, but never directed toward human vessels with obvious hostile intent. Their lead ship is broadcasting a general demand for our surrender, reported the communications officer, a young woman whose uniform bore no rank insignia Sarah recognized. Standard Sphere protocols. They want us to prepare for boarding and inspection. Admiral Webb stood at the center of the command center, his hands clasped behind his back as he studied the enemy formation. Response time: approximately 34 minutes until they reach optimum firing position, replied the tactical officer. Their weapons loadout appears standard for Sphere capital ships. Plasma cannons, particle beams, and some kind of coherent energy projector we haven't seen before. Sarah noticed that the crew's responses were delivered with the kind of calm professionalism that only came from extensive combat experience. These people had clearly faced hostile alien fleets before, despite humanity's supposedly peaceful first contact with galactic civilization. "Admiral," she said quietly, moving closer to Webb, "how many times have human ships engaged Sphere forces?" Webb glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "This will be the fourth direct confrontation. The previous three were educational." The main display shifted to show a detailed breakdown of the approaching fleet. Sarah recognized Kethvar cruisers, Altarian destroyers, and what appeared to be several vegan heavy assault ships. But there were also vessel types she'd never seen before, their configurations suggesting technologies that pushed the boundaries of known physics. The large vessel in the center formation, Dr. Vasquez said, pointing to a massive ship that dwarfed everything around it. "What species does that belong to?" "The Zephyrians," Webb replied. "They're the military arm of the Sphere. Think of them as the galactic equivalent of peacekeepers, except they've never encountered a species that refused to keep the peace." Torres looked up from his analysis station. "Admiral, their formations are designed for containing and capturing, not destruction. They're still trying to take us alive. That will change once they realize what we're capable of," Webb said. He turned to address his communications officer. "Open a channel to the fleet. All ships, prepare for Combat Protocol Omega." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She'd never heard of Combat Protocol Omega, but the way the crew responded suggested it was something far beyond standard military engagement procedures. "Admiral," she said, "what exactly is Combat Protocol Omega?" Webb turned to face her, and for a moment she saw something in his eyes that made her remember that humans had evolved as predators. It's what happens when a species of Deathworlders decides to stop pretending to be civilized. Around the command center, displays began showing information that Sarah found difficult to process. Ship specifications that included weapon systems she'd never heard of, energy output ratings that seemed impossible, and tactical projections that suggested the human fleet was preparing for a level of warfare that the galaxy hadn't seen in millions of years. "Fleet status report," Webb called out. Retribution, combat systems at full readiness, came the first response. Devastator, reporting weapon systems charged and targeting solutions locked, came the second. Harbinger, standing by for deployment of experimental ordnance, announced a third voice. The reports continued, each one describing capabilities that seemed to violate everything Sarah thought she knew about human technology. Ships that could manipulate space-time, weapons that could disrupt matter at the quantum level, and defensive systems that operated on principles she couldn't begin to understand. "Admiral," Dr. Vasquez said hesitantly, The energy signatures we're detecting from your ships, some of them are reading as dimensional distortions. How is that possible? 80 years of intensive research and development. Doctor, when you know that your entire species is marked for extinction, you tend to find ways around the impossible. The tactical display updated as the Sphere fleet continued its approach. Sarah could see that their formations were designed for a traditional space engagement, with overlapping fields of fire and coordinated defensive positioning. It was the kind of tactical doctrine that had served galactic civilizations well for countless millennia. "They're hailing us directly," announced the communications officer. "Put it through," Webb ordered. The main screen filled with the image of a Zephyrian admiral, its crystalline features arranged in what Sarah recognized as an expression of stern authority. The creature's voice carried the harmonic qualities typical of its species, but there was an underlying tension that suggested significant concern. "Human fleet, I am Admiral Corthane of the Sphere Defense Force. You will power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded for inspection. Evidence suggests that your species has violated the sacred compact by providing aid to the Devourers." Webb stepped forward, his expression calm, but his voice carrying an undertone of steel that Sarah had never heard from a human officer. "Admiral Corthane, humanity categorically denies any alliance with the Devourers. We demand the right to present evidence of our innocence before an impartial tribunal. Your denials are noted but insufficient," the Zephyrian replied. "Devourer attacks have consistently followed human exploration patterns. The correlation is beyond statistical coincidence. The correlation exists because someone with access to our navigation data has been providing it to the enemy," Webb shot back. "If you'll give us the opportunity to present our evidence, we can identify the real source of the security breach." The alien admiral's features shifted in what Sarah recognized as skepticism. "You claim that another party is impersonating human activities to frame your species?" "We don't claim it, Admiral. We can prove it." For a moment, the Zephyrian seemed to consider this. Sarah held her breath, hoping that reason might prevail over suspicion. But then, the creature's expression hardened again. "Even if such evidence exists, the risk to galactic security is too great to ignore. You will surrender for proper investigation, or we will use force to compel compliance." Webb's smile was cold and predatory. "Admiral, I think you misunderstand the tactical situation." "Elaborate." "You're operating under the assumption that you're dealing with the peaceful exploration forces that have represented humanity in galactic affairs. You're not." The transmission ended abruptly, and Webb turned to his crew. "All ships, implement Combat Protocol Omega. Show them what Deathworlders actually look like when they stop holding back." What happened next challenged everything Sarah thought she understood about space combat. The human ships didn't simply power up their weapons and advance in formation. Instead, they seemed to phase in and out of normal space, appearing and disappearing in patterns that made tracking them impossible. The Retribution itself underwent a transformation that defied explanation. Its hull began to shift and flow, reconfiguring itself into a sleeker, more aggressive configuration. Weapon ports opened along its flanks that hadn't been visible moments before, and energy readings spiked to levels that should have been impossible for a ship of its apparent size. "Dimensional fold drives online," reported the navigation officer. "Fleet is transitioning to combat formation." On the tactical display, Sarah watched as the human ships spread out in a pattern that seemed random until she realized they were positioning themselves at the vertices of a complex geometric shape that surrounded the entire Sphere fleet. "Admiral," the tactical officer called out, "Sphere forces are attempting to target our vessels, but their targeting systems appear to be having difficulty maintaining locks." "Quantum stealth systems functioning normally," Webb replied. "Begin Phase 2. The space around the Sphere fleet suddenly filled with distortions that looked like ripples in the fabric of reality itself. Several of the alien ships began to drift off course as their navigation systems struggled to compensate for local space-time anomalies. "What are you doing to them?" Sarah asked, horrified at the implications of weapons that could manipulate space itself. We're demonstrating that there are levels of warfare that the galactic community has never had to consider, Webb replied. When every conflict in your history has been resolved through negotiation or limited conventional weapons, you don't develop countermeasures for enemies who fight to win at any cost. Dr. Vasquez was staring at her instruments in shock. The energy patterns we're detecting, it's like you're rewriting the laws of physics in localized areas. Not rewriting, Doctor, just applying them in ways that peaceful species never thought to explore. The Sphere fleet was now in obvious disarray. Their precise formations had broken apart as individual ships struggled to maintain position in the distorted space-time around them. Several vessels were broadcasting distress signals as their crews dealt with gravitational anomalies that were wreaking havoc with their internal systems. Sir, the communications officer announced, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 sphere vessels. Webb nodded. Accept their surrender and establish containment fields around their ships. I want them alive for questioning. Sarah realized that what she was witnessing wasn't just a military engagement. It was a demonstration of power calculated to fundamentally alter the balance of galactic politics. Humanity wasn't just defending itself. It was announcing that the peaceful species of the galaxy now had to deal with a new player who operated by entirely different rules. Admiral, she said quietly, what happens now? Webb turned to look at her, and she saw something in his expression that was both proud and sad. Now, Commander, the galaxy learns that humanity's role in galactic civilization is going to be very different from what anyone expected. As the remaining sphere ships began broadcasting surrender requests, Sarah realized that her peaceful exploration mission had just become the opening move in a much larger conflict that would reshape the entire galactic community. The question was whether humanity's new role would be as protector or conqueror, and whether there was really a difference when survival was at stake. The detention bays aboard the Retribution had been designed to hold a variety of alien physiologies, but Sarah had never imagined they would be used to confine representatives of the galactic government. Admiral Corthane and his senior staff sat behind a containment field that shimmered with energies she couldn't identify, their crystalline features reflecting the overhead lighting and patterns that suggested deep confusion. They've been cooperative so far, Admiral Webb reported as he and Sarah's team approached the detention area. Once they realized that their weapons and defensive systems were completely ineffective against our combat protocols, they seemed eager to discuss the situation. Dr. Vasquez carried a portable scanner that had been modified with technology from the Deep Strike fleet. According to Webb, it could detect biological anomalies that normal instruments would miss. Admiral, if there really are shape-shifting infiltrators among the sphere forces, this should be able to identify them. What exactly are we looking for? Torres asked, studying the readings from his own enhanced tactical scanner. The architects can mimic any biological form perfectly, Webb explained, but they can't replicate quantum-level cellular structures. Their shape-shifting ability works by reorganizing matter at the molecular level, but the quantum signatures remain consistent with their original form. Sarah watched as Dr. Vasquez began scanning the captured sphere officers. The readings appeared normal at first, showing the expected biological patterns for each species represented. But as they moved down the line of prisoners, the scanner began registering anomalies. Admiral, Dr. Vasquez said quietly, her voice tight with excitement and concern, I'm reading quantum signatures that don't match the apparent biological forms. 3 of the prisoners are showing massive inconsistencies. Webb nodded grimly. Which ones? Dr. Vasquez indicated a Kethvar communications officer, an Altarian tactical specialist, and what appeared to be a human liaison officer whose presence Sarah hadn't questioned until now. The human, she said slowly. How long has he been assigned to sphere forces? According to the records we've accessed from their ships, Torres replied, consulting his scanner. Lieutenant Commander Hayes has been serving as a cultural exchange officer for the past 18 months. Webb's expression darkened. 18 months. right around the time when Devourer attacks began following human exploration patterns. He turned to the security detail. Separate those three from the others. I want them in individual containment cells with full quantum isolation fields. As the suspected infiltrators were moved to more secure facilities, Sarah noticed that the apparent human officer moved with a subtle wrongness that she couldn't quite identify. His proportions were correct, his mannerisms seemed appropriately human, but there was something in the way he carried himself that suggested he was consciously imitating rather than naturally expressing human behavior. "Admiral," the Zephyrian commander called out from behind his containment field, "what evidence do you have that these individuals are not what they appear to be?" Webb approached the field barrier. "Quantum-level biological scans, Admiral Korthane. Your people might be able to examine the data if they're interested in the truth." The crystalline being's features shifted in what Sarah recognized as confusion. Quantum biological analysis is not a technique known to sphere science. How did your species develop such capabilities? When you're preparing to fight an enemy that can perfectly mimic any biological form, Webb replied, you learn to look deeper than surface appearances. Dr. Vasquez finished her scans and approached Webb with her findings. "Admiral, the quantum signatures are definitely non-human and non-galactic. The patterns suggest a silicon-based neural matrix overlaid on whatever biological form they're mimicking. Can you force them to reveal their true forms?" Sarah asked. "Not without risking permanent damage to their consciousness," Dr. Vasquez replied. "But we can prove they're not who they claim to be." Webb activated a communication panel that connected to the individual containment cells. "This is Admiral Webb. I know what you are, and I know why you're here. The question is whether you want to cooperate voluntarily or whether we need to extract the information we need." The response came from the cell containing the supposed human officer. The voice was perfectly modulated in human speech patterns, but there was something underlying it that suggested vast intelligence and complete alien thinking processes. "You cannot prove what you suspect, Admiral. Your quantum scanning technology is impressive, but it cannot differentiate between natural biological variation and what you call shape-shifting." Webb smiled coldly. "Actually, it can. Dr. Vasquez, would you care to explain the quantum resonance patterns we detected?" Dr. Vasquez accessed the communication system. The cellular quantum signatures show interference patterns that are only possible when matter has been artificially reorganized at the molecular level. Natural biological processes don't create those kinds of resonance cascades. The silence from the containment cells was telling. Sarah realized that the infiltrators had been counting on their biological mimicry being perfect, and the discovery of quantum-level detection methods had caught them completely off guard. Furthermore, Dr. Vasquez continued, the neural activity patterns we're detecting are operating on frequencies that biological brains can't generate. You're using some kind of artificial consciousness matrix to control the mimicked biological forms. Admiral Korthane's features shifted in what Sarah now recognized as shock. "You are claiming that these individuals are artificial constructs." "Not artificial," Webb corrected. "They're a different kind of biological entity entirely. One that evolved the ability to perfectly mimic other life forms." The communication system activated again, and this time the voice that emerged was completely different. It was mechanical, harmonic, and utterly alien in its tonal qualities. "Impressive, Admiral Webb. Your species has developed capabilities that we did not anticipate." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The voice belonged to something that had never been human, despite having perfectly mimicked human appearance and behavior for months. "I am designation Prime 774 of the Architect Collective," the voice continued. "My purpose was to gather intelligence on human military capabilities and provide targeting data to our Devourer allies." The casual admission sent shock waves through everyone listening. Sarah realized that they were hearing a confession to genocide on a galactic scale. "How long have your people been infiltrating galactic civilization?" Webb demanded. "Infiltration began approximately 4,000 years ago," Prime 774 replied. The Devourers required detailed information about potential target species before beginning harvest operations. Dr. Vasquez looked horrified. For 1,000 years? How many civilizations have been destroyed because of your intelligence gathering? Civilization destruction is not our concern. We provide data. The Devourers determine harvest priorities. Admiral Corthane's features were now cycling through what Sarah recognized as expressions of rage and betrayal. The sacred compact, the principles of galactic harmony, all of it has been compromised by your infiltration. Your concepts of harmony and cooperation made infiltration remarkably simple. The architect replied with what sounded like amusement. Species that have evolved beyond warfare are remarkably trusting. Webb stepped closer to the communication panel. What was your specific mission regarding humanity? Human technological development progressed faster than Devourer projections indicated, Prime 774 explained. Our mission was to delay human military advancement while gathering intelligence on your actual capabilities. The accusations against your species were designed to turn galactic civilization against you before you could become a threat to Devourer operations. Sarah felt pieces of a vast puzzle clicking into place. You've been framing humanity to prevent us from allying with other species against the Devourers. Correct. Human death world evolution created military potential that concerned our allies. Isolation was necessary to prevent you from sharing advanced warfare techniques with peaceful species. Torres looked up from his analysis station. Admiral, I'm detecting communication bursts from the captured ships. The infiltrators were broadcasting everything they learned about our capabilities. Webb's expression became grimly determined. To whom? Unknown, sir. The signals are using quantum entanglement protocols that we can't trace. The implications hit Sarah immediately. They're warning the Devourers about our fleet capabilities. Undoubtedly, Webb agreed. Which means we need to accelerate our timeline significantly. He activated the ship's general communications system. All stations, this is Admiral Webb. Prepare for immediate jump to the Sol system. Combat Fleet Omega is returning home. Admiral, Dr. Vasquez said urgently. What about the Sphere forces? If they understand that humanity has been framed, they might be willing to ally with us against the real threat. Webb looked at Admiral Corthane, whose crystalline features were now arranged in what Sarah was learning to recognize as deep contemplation. Admiral, the Zephyrian said slowly, if what these architects claim is true, then the Sphere owes humanity a significant apology. More than that, we owe you our assistance in dealing with the real threat. The question, Webb replied, is whether your people are ready for the kind of war that's coming. The Devourers aren't going to be impressed by diplomatic protests and strongly worded resolutions. Admiral Corthane's features shifted into what Sarah realized was determination. Admiral Webb, the Sphere of 9 Worlds places our fleets at your disposal. If humanity has been preparing for this war for 80 years, then perhaps it's time for the rest of us to learn what real warfare looks like. As the Retribution prepared for the jump back to human space, Sarah realized that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer the new species trying to find its place in galactic civilization. They were about to become the teachers in a curriculum that no peaceful species had ever wanted to learn. The war against the Devourers was about to begin in earnest, and the galaxy was about to discover what happened when a species of Deathworlders stopped pretending to be civilized. The Sol system looked nothing like Sarah remembered from her departure 3 months earlier. Where once there had been scattered research stations and civilian traffic, there was now a massive military installation that stretched from Mars' orbit to the asteroid belt. Ships that she recognized as human in design, but with modifications that seemed to bend the laws of physics, hung in perfect formations around defensive platforms that bristled with weapons she couldn't identify. My God, Dr. Vasquez whispered from her position at the observation deck viewport. How long has this been here? Admiral Webb stood beside them, his expression unreadable as he watched the fleet's approach to what had clearly become humanity's primary military stronghold. The defensive grid has been under construction for 75 years. Most of it was built inside hollowed-out asteroids to avoid detection by long-range sensors. Torres consulted his tactical display, his face showing amazement at the readings he was receiving. "Admiral, I'm detecting over 3,000 combat vessels in this system alone. The energy signatures suggest weapons and propulsion systems that are generations ahead of anything in the public fleet databases." The public fleet was always intended as a diplomatic and exploration force, Webb explained. "What you're seeing now is humanity's real military capability." Sarah watched as they passed a massive construction facility that was clearly producing warships at an industrial scale that defied comprehension. The vessels emerging from the shipyards were sleek, predatory things that bore only superficial resemblance to the peaceful exploration craft that had represented humanity in galactic affairs. "How many people know about this?" she asked. "More than you might expect. Fewer than would be ideal," Webb replied. "Approximately 12% of humanity has been directly involved in the defense project. The rest, well, they're about to find out that their peaceful existence has been protected by preparations for a war they never knew was coming." The communication system activated with a priority signal from what appeared to be Earth's primary defense coordination center. The voice that emerged was crisp, professional, and carried the authority of someone accustomed to managing planetary-scale military operations. "Admiral Webb, this is Defense Coordinator Harrison. Status report on the galactic situation. The infiltration hypothesis has been confirmed, Coordinator. We have 3 architect agents in custody and evidence of systematic intelligence gathering that spans multiple galactic civilizations. The Sphere of Nine Worlds has agreed to military cooperation, but they'll need extensive training in Deathworld combat doctrine." "Understood. How much time do we have?" Webb's expression darkened. "The architects transmitted our fleet capabilities to their handlers before we could stop them. I estimate the Devourers will adjust their timeline accordingly. We're looking at weeks rather than months before the primary assault begins." Sarah felt the weight of that statement settle over her like a shroud. Everything she had understood about humanity's place in the galaxy, about the peaceful exploration of space, about the gradual integration with galactic civilization, had been a carefully constructed illusion designed to hide the fact that her species had been preparing for a war of extinction. "Admiral," she said quietly, "what role do you want my crew to play in this?" Webb turned to face her, and she saw something in his expression that reminded her of why she had chosen to serve in the first place. "Commander, your ship and crew represent something crucial that we can't afford to lose. You're proof that humanity's capacity for exploration, discovery, and peaceful cooperation is real, even if it's not the whole story." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her analysis of the defensive installations. "Admiral, I've been thinking about the quantum signatures we detected from the architect infiltrators. If they're using quantum entanglement communication, there might be a way to trace those signals back to their source." "Explain." "Quantum entanglement creates paired particles that maintain instantaneous connection regardless of distance. But the process of creating those pairs leaves detectable signatures in subspace. If we can identify the frequency harmonics, we might be able to locate architect communication networks." Torres nodded enthusiastically. "And if we can locate their networks, we can trace them back to their base of operations." "More than that," Dr. Vasquez continued, her excitement growing, "we might be able to intercept Devourer communications and get advance warning of their attack patterns." Admiral Webb smiled for the first time since Sarah had met him. "Doctor, I think you've just outlined our next mission." As the Retribution docked with the primary military station, Sarah found herself surrounded by technology that seemed more like science fiction than reality. The docking bay was filled with ships that incorporated design principles she didn't recognize, and the personnel moving around them wore uniforms that indicated military specializations she'd never heard of. "Quantum warfare specialists," Webb explained as he noticed her confusion. "Temporal combat ingénieur." Dimensional artillery crews. When you're preparing to fight an enemy that operates on galactic timescales, You need military disciplines that didn't exist before. They were met by a reception committee that included several individuals Sarah recognized from news reports, prominent scientists, military leaders, and political figures who had supposedly been focused on peaceful endeavors. The realization that they had all been part of this massive deception was both disturbing and oddly reassuring. "Commander Chun," said a woman Sarah recognized as Dr. Elizabeth Manning, one of Earth's most prominent physicists, "your crew's discovery of the architect infiltration has accelerated our timeline considerably. We need to brief you on the full scope of the situation." The briefing room they entered was unlike any military facility Sarah had ever seen. The walls were covered with displays showing galactic maps that included information about species, civilizations, and threat assessments that went far beyond anything available through normal diplomatic channels. The Devourers operate in thousand-year cycles. Dr. Manning explained as holographic displays showed the movement patterns of massive fleets across galactic space. They identify promising sectors, infiltrate, and study the local civilizations, and then harvest everything of value before moving on. Sarah studied the data, noting that entire spiral arms of the galaxy were marked as harvested zones. How many civilizations have they destroyed? Conservative estimates suggest over 10,000, Dr. Manning replied. Advanced spacefaring civilizations, species with millions of years of history and culture, entire stellar empires, all stripped down to basic matter and energy. Admiral Webb activated another section of the display. But here's what makes them particularly dangerous. They don't just consume resources. They learn. Every civilization they encounter teaches them something new about technology, biology, or strategic thinking. Torres leaned forward to study the tactical projections. So by the time they reach us, they'll have the accumulated knowledge of thousands of advanced civilizations. Exactly, which is why humanity's approach has been different from anything they've encountered before. Dr. Vasquez looked confused. How is our approach different? Because, said a new voice from the entrance to the briefing room, every other species they've faced has tried to defend themselves using the same principles that made them successful in peaceful times. Sarah turned to see a man in his 60s wearing the uniform of Earth's highest military command. She recognized him from news reports as General Marcus Thompson, supposedly the head of Earth's Peaceful Space Defense Coordination. "General," she said, realizing that his public role had been as much of a deception as everything else. "Commander Chun, the difference between humanity and every other species the Devourers have faced is that we evolved specifically to kill things that were trying to kill us. Every other galactic civilization evolved past that stage millions of years ago." He gestured to the displays showing Devourer fleet movements. They're used to facing enemies who fight wars the way they understand them. Organized fleets, strategic objectives, territorial control, resource management. They're not prepared for enemies who fight wars the way humans understand them. "Which is?" Sarah asked. General Thompson's smile was cold and predatory. "Total warfare. Complete commitment to the destruction of the enemy. No rules, no conventions, no holding back because it might be considered unsporting." Admiral Webb nodded. "The Devourers harvest civilizations. Humans exterminata tres." It's a fundamental difference in approach that they're not prepared for. Dr. Manning activated a new section of the display showing ship designs that seem to violate basic physics. "We've spent 80 years developing weapons and tactics that peaceful species would never consider. Technologies that manipulate space-time, weapons that operate on quantum levels, strategies that accept massive casualties in exchange for tactical advantage." Sarah realized that she was looking at the accumulated military development of a species that had spent nearly a century preparing for a single, decisive conflict. Everything about human space technology, from their exploration vessels to their research stations, had been designed with this war in mind. "What's the plan?" she asked. General Thompson's expression became grimly determined. "Simple, Commander. We're going to find the Devourer main fleet, and then we're going to demonstrate what happens when a species of Deathworlders decides that something needs to stop existing. As the briefing continued, Sarah realized that her peaceful exploration mission had become something much more important. She and her crew were about to become part of the most significant military operation in human history, and possibly in galactic history. The war to determine whether humanity would survive or become just another entry in the Devourer's catalog of consumed civilizations was about to begin. And for the first time since learning about the threat, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. Because whatever else humans might be, they were very, very good at ensuring that threats to their survival stopped being threats permanently. The galaxy was about to learn what that meant.